From the highest of mountains to the deepest of concrete jungles, the world is strange and full of mystery. Join us as we descend into the dark and explore the strange wilderness.
Welcome to Strange Wilderness, the show that takes you out of the comfort of your homes and pulls back the curtain to show you the strange and untamed world we live in. I'm Ginge, and my co-host Matt STFU and I invite you to join us as we investigate the things that go bump in the night. Do you have a story you'd like us to read and discuss, or possibly suggestions for future topics to cover? Send us a message over on Twitter at Strange Wilderness Pod, or send an email to strangewilderness.pod@gmail.com. Thank you, and enjoy our descent into the dark.
Hey, welcome to season 2. We made it.
Woo!
9 episodes, and we haven't been disappeared to some CIA black site yet.
That we know of.
That we know of. This could be a simulation. I'm not sure.
Let's not get into the simulation theory yet. My brain can't handle that yet.
It's kind of funny because as soon as I said that, I could hear sirens off in the distance in my area. So they're after me. They found me. This is going to be a really quick recording, folks.
Oh, man.
So yeah, welcome to season 2. You have successfully done it, people of the internet. You have dissected this possible lizard man and gotten to my mushy, gooey core, because I'm going to gush over you for a few minutes here. For starters, thank you for the warm reception that we have gotten regarding the Halloween special. It was a lot of work from both the voice acting side as well as on me in terms of the edit, but we pulled through. I think it sounds pretty great. This is me telling you to hold me accountable. Next time, I'm not talking for 80% of it. You heard it here. It ain't happening.
And I'm gonna, kind of kick in here. If you have not listened to it yet, I highly suggest doing so, because it was amazing. You did incredible with that. So I can't wait to see what happens next. And yes, please don't voice 80% of it next time, because I'm sure your voice was non-existent after that for a bit.
Yeah, I couldn't talk for like 3 days. Like, I broke my voice, and it wasn't even that bad. Like, I didn't scream or anything, but yeah, it was just good stuff. On top of that, we are doing extremely well in terms of the podcast's growth. It's growing like some sort of growth accelerating apparatus, where less than a month ago we were sitting at 50 total plays according to Anchor. And when I say total plays, that encompasses Spotify and Apple Pods, Google Pods, and all of those things. It doesn't include YouTube and SoundCloud and TikTok, whatever. As of today, as of recording this, we have quintupled, almost sextupled that 50, and are now comfortably sitting at 265 total plays.
Hey.
So, like our, the patron saint of youth music and our Lord and Savior Gwen Stefani says, this is bananas. And it goes without saying, none of that would be possible without you, the people of the world, the people of the internet. Thank you for tuning in. Even if it's just for one episode, it matters, and it is very much appreciated by this possible lizard man and his spider co-host. And yeah, I I'm excited for what the future brings.
We have a lot of really good things planned, and I think a lot of it is going to be quite unexpected, and I think that's going to be really fun. And so I would definitely keep an eye out for our episodes, because things are going to change just a tiny bit, and I think it's going to bring a whole new dynamic to the podcast. So
Yeah, so speaking of, season 1 and season 2 are largely experimental in the sense that, we're trying to get our footing, we're trying to see what works and what doesn't. Season 2 will wrap up with the close of 2021, so I believe the last episode comes out like just before New Year's Eve. And so season 3 will start pretty much right as soon as 2022 rears its ugly head. And once season 3 starts, we'll have kind of a general sense of what we like to do versus what works and what doesn't work, etc. And so, yeah, there is a cornucopia of content on the horizon that is, very much what you've come to expect in the way of like stories and things of that nature, just from a broader sense. We have some more niche, kind of crazy out there things that we're thinking about doing. There's some more fun, whimsical, crunchy granola things that are going to be happening. Just a lot of cool stuff to look forward to on both the audio side of things as well as the video side of things. So, yeah, if you ain't following us, what are you doing?
yeah, hit that what is it? Hit that like button and subscribe and turn that bell notification on so you know when we upload next.
But unlike most YouTubers, this is not sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. So,
Oh man.
Don't worry about the graphics and something, creator code for silver or whatever currency they use.
We're sorry, Raid Shadow Legends. Please, we'll take. You can sponsor us.
I promise not to sarcastically read your script.
He's lying.
I just lied to you. So, with all that said, once again, from the Strange Wilderness team, thank you guys. It's been one hell of a journey for the past, 2-ish months, and I say this on Twitter all the time, but we are just getting started. Obviously you've come to know me with the iceberg. In the podcast sense, we are just scraping the tip of the iceberg. There is so much to look forward to, so enjoy it. Enjoy the ride.
And then from my side too, I want to thank you all as well. And I also want to say sorry if it seems like I wasn't very talkative. And the first few episodes, I was definitely trying to find my ground, and I was a little shy. And so that's also going to be changing. So I'm a very opinionated person and I have a lot to say. I just haven't been. So yeah, be ready for that.
All right. Well, with all of that said, let's get into today's episode, which it almost seems like the person who's choosing these topics is singling out those who have a certain phobia of the ocean / lake / I don't know, like juice box amount of liquid.
I mean, if we talk about the Capri Suns that had the mold in them, I mean, that could also count. Do you not remember that? I
haven't heard about or seen a Capri Sun in close to a decade, and that just brought back so many memories. It was like Capri Sun and Sunny D.
Yes. And Tang for like the shortest time, because it's like, oh, that's what the astronauts drink, so that's what we drink.
Yeah, I wasn't a cool kid. I had to drink Sunny D in the dark while my friends had Tang in the light. I wasn't invited to many birthday parties because my family didn't buy Tang. Anyway, y'all are gonna be hella uncomfortable if you're afraid of the water, because this area actually exists on Earth. It is physical. You can go and you can touch it with like an appendage. And there's a lot of mystery surrounding it. There's a lot of really cool stuff if you're, a fan of geography and like the natural world and how the Earth has evolved over the past 25 million years. But yeah, there's a lot of scary stuff involved. So without further ado, this is the mystery and the story of Lake Baikal in Russia.
Of course it's in Russia.
So to give you some context behind the lake, we have to go back 25 million years. So 25 million years ago, when parachute pants and boy bands roamed the Earth, a massive fissure opened within the Eurasian continent. And as a result of that, there was this massive lake that was formed, in the fissure that today is known as Lake Baikal. By all accounts, by all records, whatever, this lake is considered to be the oldest and deepest lake on Earth. When I say deepest, I ain't kidding. It measures roughly 5,387 feet, or roughly 1,642 meters deep, and contains about 5,500 cubic miles of water. To put that into perspective, that is about 20% of Earth's fresh surface water. Or, to the layman, a heckin' lot of water. But that's not all. This lake is, by all accounts, an ecological and biological marvel. Like a lot of these kind of isolated places on Earth, you could look at like Antarctica and the rainforest and places like that. This lake kind of falls into that category because it has thousands of species, and roughly 80% of them are unique to that specific location. So there's 3,700, give or take, species within this lake, and that includes plants, that includes animals. Apparently there's a really photogenic seal that exists there. That might come up later with our talk about aliens, because maybe the reason why it's photogenic is it's sentient and just really likes Snapchat filters. But yeah, 80% of these animals and plants are specific to that area, of those 3,700 animals. That's insane.
Yep.
Now, before we continue, I am going to go out on a limb, and I am going to say that I'm probably going to mispronounce like 3/4 of the Russian words, so I'm sorry.
Hey.
I'm not, but I'm sorry. This lake is located near the Russian city of, Irkutsk. See, we're off to a great start. This is also one of the largest cities in Siberia. So this lake is a massive, sprawling freshwater expanse. We've already gone through how deep it is, how old it is. But what we haven't touched on yet is that this lake is the subject of many, dare I say it, strange and wild occurrences and encounters, leading many researchers, scholars, conspiracy nuts, wackadoodles, whatever you want to call them, to spin some crazy, interconnected, tangly, wibbly-wobbly webs of conspiracies and speculation involving the lake, events that have happened around the lake and in the surrounding area, as well as potential inhabitants of said lake, like creatures that live, like SpongeBob at the bottom of this lake. In fact, this lake and the conspiracies that surround it are featured on Tier 3 of a conspiracy iceberg that, if you remember our conversation at the very beginning when we were talking about a potential content roadmap, is something that we will be diving into in potential roundtable discussions starting in Season 3. So by that, I don't necessarily mean Lake Baikal specifically, but that conspiracy iceberg will be things that we talk about going forward. So get hyped for that.
Woo.
I should also mention that this iceberg came to me courtesy of the YouTuber Wendigoon. I've shouted him out, I believe, once in one of the Cryptid Iceberg episodes, but cool YouTuber, very deadpan way of presenting things. I find it awesome. He is hilarious. And yeah, so go tell him Matt STFU sent you, and he will have no idea who you're talking about, but maybe in time he will. Like the Wendigo, he'll learn my name. Any Hoosers, back on track. Sorry for the sidebar there, folks. This area is heavily considered to be one of the biggest focal points for UFO sightings and investigations in Russia. And to nobody's surprise, there is a multitude of good reasons behind this. So, per the Russian Navy, it has been documented that roughly 50% of all UFO encounters collected by the Navy occur in the world's oceans. And beyond that, an additional 15% involve lakes. And that, when you put those two numbers together, means that roughly 2/3 of all UFO encounters are typically associated with some body of water.
Oh man.
And then you wonder why we haven't gone to certain parts of the ocean. Since the twilight years of the Soviet Union, meaning like kind of the last few years before they went defunct, the lake has allegedly been the location of a number of sightings involving aliens, UFOs, and just kind of weird stuff that can't really be placed into a category of alien or UFO or something to that effect. And obviously, because this is involving the USSR, to nobody's surprise, these were covered up for a long time. Because of course they were. It's the USSR we're talking about. But they were picked up and eventually uncovered by the media, and were later declassified by the Russian government in 2009. So that's how we're able to read this stuff right now. That's how we know these things exist. Because realistically speaking, if the Russian government didn't want us to know, we would never know. And this lake would just be a normal body of water that nobody cares about.
Which, I mean, I think I would prefer the latter and know and not know, but I mean, it's good that we know.
When it comes to water, Ginge lives in a blissful state of ignorance.
Yes, I would prefer to just pretend that it's not there.
So we're going to go through two of the major encounters involving this lake, and then there are like two other sightings that we can talk about. And from there, I think there's a kind of a cool jumping off point just to discuss kind of like these large bodies of water and, you know, branching out into the ocean and places like that with regards to all things extraterrestrial, because I got a lot to say about that. I don't have a lot to say as it is. Y'all know me. I keep my mouth shut, which is like 86% of a lie, but yeah, I got a lot to say about this. So brace yourselves. Winter is coming.
So man.
So in 1977, two researchers were piloting a submersible about 1,200 meters below the lake's surface. So if you think about that, that's most of the way there.
Wait a second.
You know?
The submarine was in the lake?
Yeah. I would imagine that it was one of those tiny little, not tiny, but like tiny little submersibles, you know, not quite like the one James Cameron likes to use,
okay. All right. Because, you know, my ex-husband was a submariner, so it's like I've seen those and I'm like, wait a second, they took that big of a thing, and okay. Either way, I know it's large, so I'm sure I would not put it past them that perhaps they did actually go down in a regular submarine.
Yeah, it is a massive lake, so I'm not 100% sure how big like the average sub would be. My guess is larger than a cow, but you know, it's I've never seen the two of them in a room together, so I can't confirm nor deny. But yeah, in any event, they were in this little submersible, something like 80% of the way down to the lake bed. You know, they're 12 out of 1,600 meters deep. And so these are researchers, right? So they're there to explore, they're there to document. They're not there for any sort of hostile, malevolent reasons like certain military groups might, but yeah, they're just doing their thing, whatever science thing they need to do. They're doing chemical titrations under the water. For those who like chemistry, they probably just cringed hearing that, because titrations are like easy but the spawn of Satan at the same time. So anyway, semantics. In an attempt to measure, the penetration of sun through the water and, how it degrades the deeper you go, these researchers at one point switched off their spotlights. So they would have been almost completely encompassed in darkness, because remember, they're 1,200 meters down. And so, like, not a whole lot of light's going to be there, if any. The thing is, almost immediately after they switched their lights off, the scientists realized they weren't in complete darkness. In fact, they were being bathed in this kind of like eerie kind of light that they said was glowing all around them. And this lasted for a segment of time. Like, we don't really know. I don't think it was ever specified, but when you're in a moment like that, it probably feels a lot longer than it actually is. So it could have been a few seconds, but for them it could have felt like an hour.
Yeah.
So the way that I read it is almost immediately after they realized that they were being illuminated by this light, it basically just phased out and vanished.
Well, that's not natural.
Exactly. And one of the researchers even said, quote, or I should preface this by saying, this was translated from Russian, so there are grammatical errors in this. I'm not going to read it with an accent because I really don't want to offend people, but at the same point, yeah, good job, translate. So like I was saying, one of the researchers stated, quote, "It was so like if our device was lit from above and the side by two strong spotlights. Only a minute later, unknown floodlights went out and we found ourselves in total darkness." End quote. So basically, he says that it's a minute, but like I said, like unless you're literally looking at a stopwatch, you don't know. Like that could have been like 15 seconds, but it felt like a minute or something like that. Time moves fast when you're enjoying yourself. Time moves backwards when you look at your work clock or when you're doing plank.
Yes.
So that's the first sighting / encounter / whatever you want to call it. Nothing too crazy, like it was just an unknown light. And before we get into the second encounter, my theory pertaining to this specifically well, I shouldn't say theory. I have a few theories regarding this. And one of them kind of plays off the movie, what's it called? I think it's like Europa Report or something like that with Charlton Copley. And basically the TLDW in regards to that movie is that, this crew goes to Europa to start drilling to try and get to the liquid ocean and figure out what the hell's there. And bad things happen, obviously, because it's like sci-fi horror. All that bad stuff wouldn't have happened if all that bad stuff didn't happen. And I think it's like one of the last scenes in the movie, one of the last shots. It could potentially be like what closes out the movie. But they have, I think it's either a submersible or like a drone or their craft itself or something like that gets literally like dragged under the water because they more or less created like a big crack in the ice. And so obviously it just shattered and fell, and things weigh a lot. And so this last scene shows like their camera or one of their camera arrays picking up what honestly looks like a colossal squid or some sort of like octopus or something like that, because you just see tentacles. But they are being lit, like they have like rings that are bioluminescent. And so that's where one of my theories pulls me, is that when you get to a certain depth, a lot of animals begin developing bioluminescence, to be able to potentially find food or to attract mates or some combination of the two, or just weird animal things. I don't know. Slugs are weird. But who's to say that larger animals don't have that same kind of bioluminescence? And so that light that they saw could have been, in theory, a very large animal that basically scampered off as soon as, they started to react to it. Maybe they did something, or, like they stirred the submersible in a certain way and it was just like, nope. The alternative has more to do with our second encounter, which, if this is real, then we got a problem. Like, an actual problem. Not just kind of like William has 7 oranges, Martha has 6 tangerines, calculate the mass of the sun. Most math problems in a nutshell. So this second encounter is the whole reason why I wanted to investigate this lake at all, because I read about it a long time ago and was like, this is cool as shit.
I don't think I'm gonna think it's cool, but let's go.
I'm communicating directly with your sleep paralysis demon so that tonight, we're on the same page.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's good to know ahead of time.
So in 1982, about 5 years after this first, largely innocuous encounter, a team of 7 military divers were dispatched for some reason or another to this lake. I don't think the reason was ever given, and if it is, yell at me somewhere, because clearly I'm an idiot and I couldn't find it, but as far as I'm aware, let's just say they got a tip that Waldo of Where's Waldo fame was camping out at the bottom of the lake, and they went to go get him. That's what we'll say. In any event, so these 7 highly trained, specialized military divers set off. They get all their gear, they go into this lake. They reach about 50 meters in depth. So for a diver, that's pretty deep. I'm not 100% sure what the deepest dive is. I don't really care because, it's bad enough we're giving Ginge nightmares. We don't want to give her, existential crises and nightmares.
Thank you.
But, yeah, so 50 meters is pretty deep. Once they hit that kind of threshold, once they pass the 50-meter mark, they apparently encountered a group of humanoid beings also swimming through the lake. They kind of approached them. Now, I say humanoid and not human because these creatures, these beings, whatever you want to call them, per the descriptions of the people who were, in the lake who saw them, is that they were roughly 3 meters tall, which is about 10 feet, and they were wearing tight-fitting, shimmery silver suits.
That's odd.
In addition to that, because this is 1982, right? Technology's still largely primitive. You watch any episode of Forensic Files and anything that's before, the early to mid-90s, they're just kind of yeah, we threw, 6 wrong people in jail because we didn't know what fingerprinting was. But, yeah, the technology is largely relatively primitive. The scuba divers would have had, big tanks and the mouth respirator dealies and big goggles that make them look funny and whatever. And so what sets these creatures apart from them, not only the fact that they're, 10 feet tall with silver skinny jeans on, is the fact that they didn't have any visible or apparent diving gear. They didn't have any breathing mechanisms, they didn't have, flippers or any of that stuff. The only thing that was to be noted, in addition to these other characteristics, is that they had almost spherical kind of dome-shaped helmets on. And, that just kind of adds a sticker to our weird wall, but who are we to judge?
Are we talking Mars Attacks dome or...
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure. In my research for this, it basically just said that they were spherical, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they were just wearing fish bowls, but...
Okay, all right. I mean, that's believable, so...
Maybe they, I was saying, maybe SpongeBob does exist at the bottom of this lake and they were just visiting Sandy. Who knows?
Could be.
But anyway, so upon encountering these creatures, there were a group. I'm not sure if there was a specific number given, but they said that they were approached in a group. In the sense that, like, my guess is they would have been able to have some sort of dance battle, even though they're underwater, like they synchronized swimming battle, whatever. And the reason why I bring up battles is because as soon as they encountered these beings and probably somehow radioed it back to whoever's on the surface, you know, the powers that be, their superior officers, whoever was in charge of this operation, is like, comrade, do the thing, capture the guy, bring him back. Vodka.
Vodka.
And beyond that, they actually called these creatures, I'm gonna butcher this, I'm so sorry. It's like Itiander or something like that, which when translated basically means half boy, half shark. And this is a creature from modern Russian folklore. So they said capture this whatever word I just said. And so, you know, these are military officers, like they're trained in combat, they're trained in all these things that, you know, the average Joe probably only thinks about when they watch Mission Impossible. And so they try to apprehend, I think, at least one of these creatures. And as they start to, you know, enact this new plan, they are forcibly and quite rapidly pushed to the surface. It's not clear as to what pushed them. It's not clear as to if it was these creatures or something else. But in essence, they basically said it was a huge surge of energy that forced them to the surface. Now, I'm not a diver. I went snorkeling once. I didn't like it. But I know that when you're diving, you can't just go super deep and then like sprint to the surface like Usain Bolt. Like you can't do that. Like you get decompression sickness, you can get the bends, you can die. Like it can be extremely traumatic and just tragic for someone to go through that ordeal. And so being forced 50 meters up to the surface, you know, these 7 people were all likely showing signs of decompression sickness and potentially left untreated, like they could die, obviously. And so whoever was on the surface basically grabbed these 7 people and was shepherding them over to these 2 decompression tanks, or like whatever devices they had to help decompress divers when they come back. And so, you know, they load 4 people up into one, start it up, let it do its thing, whatever. Then they find out that the second one just doesn't work for whatever which reason. And that sucks because those 3 people apparently died like on the shore of this lake because they just could not get the attention they needed because this decompression machine was broken.
Oh, that's so scary.
So I'll get into my theories regarding this after we do this last kind of like random sighting exploration station, but it's worth the wait, trust.
Okay.
So here are some other sightings. There's one that has a really long kind of interview with a few different townsfolk that live in a city just kind of like near the southern coast. So I'll read that verbatim once we get to it, but yeah. Now this second bit isn't really like an encounter, but it is speculation from some people who have done a lot more digging into this than I have. And they basically say that there are apparently these, you know, massive caterpillar tracks that belong to vehicles not known to us plebs on Earth. And the creepy part isn't that these tracks exist, because I know that that's creepy. The real creepy part, you know, like going down to tier 2 of the creep iceberg, if you will, is that these tracks are apparently at the bottom of the lake.
That's not that's not normal. Oh goodness.
So, you know, like there's that Discovery Channel show, like Mighty Machines or whatever, or Mega Machines, whatever it is, where it's like city-sized or, you know, like stadium-sized excavators and stuff like that. Now imagine something like that, but at the bottom of a lake that has existed for 25 million years and is 1,600 meters deep.
That's just insanity.
And it's like, the reason there are tracks is because it's moving. It's not like, you know, the Russians just decided to like yeet one of their old excavators into the lake to get rid of it, you know, sweep it under the rug as you will. But yeah, this thing would have been moving. If this is to be believed, then it would have been moving, and that's what would have caused those tracks. So we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So this final encounter was actually witnessed by, I believe, at least 13 people.
Okay.
So these locals live near the lake, and they reported seeing a massive flying saucer. And so this is what they said when interviewed in the 90s. I'm not going to differentiate between people. I'm just going to read this as if it was one person. So please understand that there are multiple people talking. It's not just one person's account. I'm just too lazy to do voices. All right, here we go. Quote, "There were 13 of us. At about 12:20 a.m., one of our guys went out into the yard. A few seconds later, runs and calls out to all of us. He stood in the center of the yard and pointed his finger at the sky. Diagonally from his gesture, 150 meters above us, hung a huge flying saucer. From the center of the plate went a phosphorescent purple ray, and at the edge of the plate were yellow portholes, almost like in our rural houses. The diameter of the plate was 70 meters. How they're coming up with these numbers, I have no idea. You know, I look at something and I'm like, that person's 6'11", and they're like, I'm 5'3", and you're just like, yep, that's what I said. So the fact that they can look at like something that's 150 meters away from them and be like, yeah, that's 70 meters in diameter, like, no, sorry. Anyway, we saw it so clearly for a long time. Someone even suggested he throw a stone at it. The weather was amazingly quiet. No sound was heard from the hanging saucer, although behind us was the village of Kurma. There was the noise of a dog barking, the lowing of cows. We were spellbound. It was a full moon, and the visibility was so clear that not one of us could doubt the reality of what we saw. And then the plate slid smoothly away, sailed along the shore of the bay, and further slipped into the hills. Neither before nor after have I ever met such a thing, but since that time, it has been kind of a sacrilege to me. Not to believe in UFOs, that is. My friend Alexander, a hunter, and his colleagues who live there for 20 years, often see UFOs, and all is fine. He's still alive. I mean, you know, I would argue that you have more to be afraid of than just UFOs when it comes to life and death, especially as a hunter, but it's fine. UFOs, that's your head's in the game at least.
Yeah.
So if to speak about glowing balls or cigars, we constantly see these on the shores of Lake Baikal. They exist. From this dish came down people in shiny, shimmering costumes. There were people, as far as I remember. 3 people in shining yellow suits. Seems they were people, yes. It was some kind of circle, it can be said. It was like a disc. It turned on the edge, and, well, windows were visible. I personally decided for myself that they were people. They had some human image. They were the same. Straight, slender, they had arms and legs. That's the most descriptive way of describing a human. You know, like Barb from accounting, she's a human woman, she's got arms and legs. She's like us, human image. Great, okay. The next time you need to describe someone, like if like a crime is committed, you could be like, yeah, so he was wearing a blue hoodie, was a human man, you know, arms, legs, quite possibly a face.
Maybe.
Yeah, like he may have had hands attached to those arms. I really don't know. It all happened so fast.
Oh man.
I just don't understand why he made off with, you know, $6,300 in Reese's Pieces, but it's fine.
I mean, Reese's Pieces are good, so.
they are, and their gait was the same as ours. A little lower down, there were 3 in orange suits. They went down from the disc like a man. The steps were very visible." End quote. So those are the accounts from multiple people, as you can probably tell by the very disjointed nature of it. I just put it all together because I really was just lazy. But in any event, after a brief period of witnessing this whole exchange, whoever was piloting these craft, whether it was the beings in orange, the beings in yellow, maybe it's kind of like Red Rising where, you know, different echelons belong to different colors, kind of like how the reds are at the bottom and the golds are at the top. I'm a book nerd, shut up, leave me alone. And, you know, maybe they had like silvers or something piloting the craft, but whatever. Moral of the story is, they saw that these people on the ground were just gawking at them because, hey, that's not something you see every day, right? Like they're probably the kind of like country folk that are amused when like the lone car from like 6 towns over passes through. And so when you see something that looks like a flying cigar or a giant plate with little plates on it, then, you know, you're probably gonna draw a crowd.
Yep.
And so these beings noticed the people gawking at them, and, you know, almost immediately, without any sort of indication, they just got back in the craft and flew away. They're just like, okay, we've overstayed our welcome. We thought this was going to be a very easy panty raid. It was clearly not. The hall monitor was walking the halls, so we just had to cheese it.
That's crazy. Can I just ask one question though?
Absolutely not. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Oh. Why is it when extraterrestrials come here, why are they always in shiny suits?
Honestly, that's a very good question. It makes me think of when I was doing the cryptid iceberg and I was talking about Indrid Cold.
Yep.
And how he was allegedly spotted wearing 3 different, like, if all 3 were the same person, he was wearing 3 different colored, like, shiny suits.
Yep.
I'm honestly not sure. Maybe aliens, like, evolved past us technologically, but they never quite, you know, evolved out of the bedazzling phase.
I mean, it was hard to get out of that phase for, you know, my generation anyway, so I can totally understand.
Anyway, I don't think I have a solid answer. They just, they typically wear either nothing, because a lot of aliens are butt-ass naked, or wear something shiny. Maybe it's, maybe they're like, you know, we've developed past clothing, but to keep the virgin humans from becoming Chad aliens, we're gonna go in clothing, and that's just, you know, that's all they have. They have like tin foil and like their pantry on the ship, and so they just fashion it into clothing quickly before they land and make contact.
I mean, more power to them.
You know, we're too busy making them into like swans and tinfoil hats that, you know, somehow always end up in Alex Jones's possession, but that could just be because like he's like Magneto, but for tinfoil hats.
Yes.
Where as soon as you make one, it just escapes your hand and breaks through the wall like the Kool-Aid Man and somehow flies across the world to him. But whatever. I'm not going to argue the semantics of Alex Jones's biology, because we all know that he is probably an alien.
I think so.
So my theory behind these craft and these aliens that are being seen, I should actually say there are 3 theories, and I subscribe to one of them, and the other 2 are, I guess, technically plausible. So I'm going to go through them, and they get progressively more terrifying as we go down. So the first one is kind of more far out and kind of trippy, but it's basically that, you know, in human history, there have been, by all accounts, conspiratorial efforts to create what we know as stargates, where, you know, you can transport yourself hundreds, thousands, millions, however far of a distance with this like portal, if you will. There's a popular show, and, you know, that's where it begins and ends. But the first theory basically says that there is something similar to that at the bottom of this lake, and instead of it being, like these aliens or something like that crossing a vast distance, it's a portal to another universe, or like an alternate reality or a parallel dimension or something science fiction-y that you can think of. And it's basically humans, but from this alternate timeline or whatever, that have set up shop at the bottom of this lake for whatever which reason. Like, I really, it's far out, but I don't really think I guess it is plausible, but it is kind of weird because, like, okay, cool, you're humans from another reality and you've somehow managed to create technology to come to our reality. That's awesome. Good for you. Here's a sticker and a cookie. But what the hell are you doing at the bottom of the deepest lake on Earth? Why not, like, roll up to the White House and be like, hey, I'm Blorpon from, like, alternate Earth 61832, and these are my associates. Hey, what's up, Joe Biden? Like, what are you doing? Now we can get into the fun ones, as if that wasn't fun, but, the second theory basically says that, this location, among many others on Earth, are actually kind of like base of operations for legitimate shiny clothes wearing extraterrestrial aliens from the space portion of space. Depending on how you look at this, depending on who you ask, there are a lot of these like supposed bases. There's the oh my god, I forget what it's called, but it's this like drop off point off the coast of California that looks like it's being put up with like pillars that you can apparently see from Google Earth. There's the Baltic Sea anomaly that looks like a ship that crashed and is just at the bottom of this lake, or the Baltic Sea. It's in the name, get it right now. And places like that, there's the whole ancient aliens theory that Bimini Road in the Bahamas used to be a runway, stuff like that. So this basically says, yes, aliens are real. For whatever which reason, they really like life under the sea. Maybe they watched a little too much of The Little Mermaid. And so they set up shop in these various locations, one of which happens to be Lake Baikal. And as such, they're doing their alien thing, and this unsanctioned dive that took place with these Russian submariners is that, like the aliens were like, nah, no, you're not allowed. And so they, basically farted the guys back to the surface. It's I guess still kind of in the realm of the first theory, where it is plausible, but obviously, like, we have no literal confirmation that aliens exist.
Yes.
And so these three theories are all going to be speculation, but I don't know. I personally subscribe to the third one the most, and it is arguably the most terrifying. So let me enlighten you. This third theory basically states that there is an offshoot of modern humans that evolved alongside us. The only difference is, obviously we are land-faring and we evolved on land, whatever. These creatures, this offshoot of humanity, instead went into the water. And they exist in the deep, like they've evolved, obviously, to adapt to these conditions, much like how we've adapted to being bipedal and whatever. And they have existed the entire time, like they exist in our oceans right now. And whenever a group like these divers or something to that effect runs up on these creatures, these humans, in some sort of weird sense, they're basically kind of like, it's almost like the whole thing with Atlantis in like DC and Marvel Comics, where they're all like, we will attack the land dwellers, they suck for whatever which reason. And so, that's basically their thing, is they're always hostile with humans. And this is very similar to, what's the movie called? I believe it's The Abyss, actually, that follows a very similar kind of concept. And if that is true, if it is to be believed, then they're not actually extraterrestrials. It's kind of cool that there's a term that exists at all to describe this kind of phenomenon, but if that is true, then yes, they are not extraterrestrials. They are considered ultra-terrestrials.
I just have one question.
Okay.
Why, of all places, for a new set of beings that evolved alongside us, why would they choose to live in the ocean? Why would you live in the scariest place, like, known to man? The deepest place in the world, where it's cold and it's dark and it's just scary.
Honestly, I'm not too sure. Like, they could have been forced into the oceans by, like, primitive humans. Like, there could have been some weird ultimate showdown style battle where instead of Mr. Rogers, it was the land dwellers pushing the ocean dwellers into the ocean dwelling portion of the ocean. They could have gone by choice. Now this is kind of a weird, like, Ancient Aliens kind of, tin foil hat crackpot kind of theory, where it talks about the I think it's called the Aquatic Ape Theory, where it's like there are offshoots of, primates that have evolved to basically be like ocean dwelling or water based. And so that could be what happened, is like instead of evolving into Homo sapiens, they evolved into whatever genus you want to give them. I'm not too sure. Maybe they just really like how their hair looks underwater.
Couldn't blame them.
They could be like me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if that is the case, then I mean, I'm sorry that that's how their life has to be lived. But at the same time, if they're comfortable and they're happy and everything is just hunky-dory, then good for them. But yeah, I'm gonna pass on that one.
It is kind of weird to think about, because these beings, whatever they are, if they exist, are infinitely more advanced than us technologically. So, it's weird to think that there is the possibility that this offshoot of humanity evolved underwater and was able to develop some crazy, like, sci-fi level technology under the sea. Like under this immense pressure in the dark, with like squids and like sharks and stuff kind of just chilling, outside of their balcony. It is a weird concept, but I guess it's not impossible.
It's not. I'll definitely give you that, but it's just something that I wish didn't exist. I just couldn't. I mean, obviously, as somebody who is just afraid of the ocean, I couldn't imagine living there. But it's like, of all the places to exist, why choose that as your? Yeah, I don't know.
So we can kind of close this out by me freaking you out a whole lot more.
Okay.
But before we do so, what do you think? Like, what do you make of all of this? Like, what is your interpretation regarding, like, these sightings and the phenomenon surrounding the lake, given its size and its depth? Like, what is your expert opinion?
I definitely, even though I don't like water or the ocean or anything of the sort, I think it's almost a given. Their word for how large our solar system is alone, and then beyond that, which we don't even know about. I mean, obviously there are things out there that we don't know just yet, and I think obviously with it being so low, like so deep and everything like that, I would argue to say the same thing. I mean, we still don't know. We can claim to say we know the deepest part of the ocean, but I don't think that we actually do. And so who's to say that all of that kind of unexplored area isn't harboring something as well? We might think we're the only beings on this earth that can, that are smart or, anything of that sort. But I don't know. I've said it before about like space and everything like that, and I guess I can say it about the ocean, but I will still say that a giant squid is still scarier than seeing like an alien walk out of the lake or the ocean.
I mean, I'm biased. Maybe if I saw like a colossal squid, I would poop my pants or like make like the Bigfoot guy. But I used to work in a restaurant, and I would clean like the squids regularly and like get them ready for calamari. So they're just gross. They don't really scare me. They're made my
slimy.
They made my hands smell. The cat really liked me, but you know it was kind of weird and gross, and I had to shower 4 times. But you know it's fine. Yeah. So by that notion, so I'm kind of on the same page, and I don't suffer from this fear, but I can completely understand why I would say most people do. And in a literal sense, if you think about it, what is it, like 70% of the world is covered in oceans or something to that effect?
Yeah,
so it's like
a large amount.
You know, close to between 2/3 and 3/4 of all available space on this planet is water, is covered in water. And so, you know, you're right, there are probably areas in the deep that we haven't explored. There are probably deeper points than what we think is the current deepest point. You know, there are probably hundreds of millions, if not more, amounts of species, whether it's tiny little plankton or shrimps or something like that to something bigger, that we haven't discovered yet. And I would argue that there are some that we probably never will discover because they're just so far out of our reach.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like there was just recently a brand new, well, it's not brand new, but we just discovered a new deep sea fish as well, if I can recall correctly. I mean, don't hold me to that, but I'm pretty sure I saw something about that, and that just goes to show, I mean, we've been exploring the ocean, I mean, since I can remember, and so probably since the 50s? I don't know, like, when it really started to get, like, deep down into it and stuff like that, but that just goes to show that for as long as we've been on this earth, the things that have been on this earth longer than us, you know, that may have survived, you know, the big meteor or whatever it is that you believe in, they are still down there. They're still evolving. The things that are down there in the deep continue to evolve, you know, as the centuries go on and stuff like that, to adapt, because obviously climate change, all that kind of stuff. So it's like, just like the lake has its own, you know, unique fish and wildlife, I guess you could say. Obviously the ocean is going to have the same thing. So, yeah. And,
you know, just kind of doubling back to like the fear that stems from these bodies of water. Again, I'm going to reference Wendigoon. Cool guy, go watch his videos. His most recent video that describes mysteries involving the ocean, and eventually he gets into why he is so afraid of it. And he kind of hits the nail on the head in the sense that, like, if you're in space, you know, space is theoretically endless. And if you're in space, you know, you can see things around you, unless you're completely like in interstellar space or away from any stars, whatever. But like, you always have kind of a general gauge of things, you know, like if you're floating in space and the sun is out, obviously the sun is doing its thing, you can see stuff around you. If like an asteroid were hurtling toward you, you'd be able to see it, albeit, you know, super far in the distance, but it would gradually get bigger. But it's there, like, you know, it's there. In the ocean, you know, you can see relatively far in front of you and underneath you and stuff, but at some point that just stops and it's murky. And so, you know, if you're floating in the middle of the Pacific and there's no land around you and there's no like markers or anything, if you look a certain way or whatever, like, you see like blue and just nothing. And, you know, this is kind of how some predators actually hunt. You know, look at great white sharks. They will dive down to a certain depth and kind of just circle around, you know, what I would describe as potentially past that like murky threshold. And when they spot, smell, use their shark sense to spot like a prey, whether it's a seal or, you know, your favorite person snack. They will rocket themselves up and jump out of the water, and that's where you get all those slow-mo shots of sharks during Shark Week. So it's one of those things, right? And the way Wendigoon describes it is, he says, you know, like, if I saw a shark, obviously I'd be afraid because I would probably be about to die, but, you know, at least that's something tangible that you can see in the water.
Yes.
If you're just there and you're alone and you see nothing, you know, the fear of the unknown, which I would argue is the greatest and most powerful fear a human can hold, takes over. And that's when you're like, what exists here? What is here?
Well, and so a weird known, and some of, you know, like, you know this about me, I like the ocean scares me, but I also love to watch stuff about the ocean. And so it's like things as you go deeper, they just did a study. A lot of them will not eat for days. Most of the stuff that's down in the deep is like crustaceans. So they're the garbage pickers. They literally just pick the stuff off, like, you know, the ground that falls down. But it's like, we know that, like, there is some big stuff. And, you know, there was a submersible that they picked something up so large that their camera, which I believe was like an IMAX camera or something like that, it couldn't pick up the whole thing. And it's like, my brain can't even handle that. And so I'm not looking forward to this, but like at the same time, I am still very curious and I want to know these things. So that way, like, if for some reason I go down to the bottom of the ocean, I'm ready.
Oh yeah. Have you ever watched, was it Blue Planet, where they did the one episode on like the deep ocean and all the weird stuff that exists down there that we know of? It was like narrated by David Attenborough, because of course it was.
No, I haven't.
But I recommend that. I mean, like, get your favorite blankie, grab Josh, or like an emotional support pillow or something like that.
I have a weighted blanket.
Yeah, and like flip that on, because it's like 45 minutes and it is bizarre. Like, to see some of these things, and some of them are just proof that if God exists, then God has like one wicked sense of humor. But yeah, I think that's I think I think we're in for some really weird, rude awakenings and hard pills to swallow when it comes to our own oceans and the universe at large. So listen here, folks, you heard it here first. Stuff's about to start happening. I'm not going to say what, because I don't want to end up on the UFO subreddit where they're like, some random guy said disclosure's happening tomorrow. No, but
maybe,
you know,
no, I was kidding.
Mark my words, we haven't been disappeared yet, so that means that we're not quite onto the truth yet. So take what I say with a grain of salt, but at the same point, like, it's happening. It is coming. No matter where we are on Earth, and no matter how much we build and destroy, we are at the mercy of a wild, uncaring, unforgiving planet that's full of terror and mystery. Be sure to follow Strange Wilderness on TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and SoundCloud for the full, immersive experience. Until the darkness calls us again, thank you so much for listening, and stay safe out there. Because out in the wild, anything can happen.